back at it.
We are back.
Back at it.
After a hiatus.
A bit of a hiatus.
Just a bit.
We had some things going on. You got sick for a little bit.
We had a lot of stuff going on.
Yes, there was a lot of stuff going on, and when we have to choose,
including the crud,
it's fall. It was fall in Wisconsin, and bugs go around.
Yeah.
But yeah, when we have to choose between things like this, which are admittedly more fun,
right,
and keeping the trains running on time before the commission, obviously one of those wins, and it's not this.
Yes, right. Our regulatory work is job one.
It is job one. All right, but what's up, everybody? Corey Singletary with the Citizens Utility Board, back with a long overdue episode of CUB Tracks, along with
Tom Content, Citizens Utility Board.
Tom, our executive director. Joining us as usual, and we really, despite the fact that there are things going on, we felt it was important to really sort of take a moment and sit down and try to, get the word out to some utility customers of two of the larger utilities in the state, We Energies. As well as Wisconsin Gas, if you're a gas customer, and Wisconsin Public Service Corporation up in the northeast part of the state, about the rate cases that are currently going on and kind of what those might mean for customers in terms of their bills starting in 2023 if things go certain ways.
Exactly. And we want to emphasize that this is the time to make your voice heard because the public comment period is closing on these cases, and there are in-person public hearings next week. November 1st and 3rd, that we want you to be aware of and show up at if you want to have your voice heard.
All right. So maybe the best thing for folks. So rather than sort of burying this, if earlier in this year you got one of these two, all right, from either Wisconsin Public Service Corporation or We Energies. I'll probably put them up on the screen on the YouTube video. But if you got one of these earlier this year, you probably were told by the utility that they came in for a rate case. They were looking for an increase, and in both of these flyers, these bill inserts and notifications to customers, the companies told their customers that they were seeking a rate increase that would cause residential rates to go up by about 5 to 6%. Or about $5 to $6 per month on an average basis if you're sort of an average user of electricity. So that's on the electric side, and natural gas was a little bit higher, but they also presented those numbers there. But the electric one is really the kind of eye-watering one. So if you're a We Energies or a Wisconsin Public Service customer, you probably got one of these, and so we were probably thinking 5 to 6%. That's not great, but at least that's not. That's not terrible. Maybe that's your initial reaction, but that has changed, and now you're potentially more looking something in the realm of if the utility if We Energies, for example, gets what they want in their rate case, then residential customers would be looking at something in the neighborhood of actually 13%. Actually, more than 13%.
More than 13%. So we're talking double digits now for both utilities.
Yeah, and actually, basically, more than double what they had originally told their customers earlier this year to expect in terms of an electric rate increase. And then for Wisconsin Public Service, it's even worse. Because if the utility gets what they want there, it's about a 14.5% increase on electric. And that's on top of an increase on the natural gas side, which we haven't even started talking about. So Tom mentioned public comment periods.
Yes.
The public comment periods are open for both these cases until when?
That's right. So if you want to file a comment online, and we'll show you, we'll put links in here for you. But on the Public Service Commission website, there's a page that's file a public comment. And if you're a We Energies customer, you have until November 7th. And if you're a Wisconsin Public Service customer, you have until November 3rd to go on that website. But the alternative is they have now scheduled public hearings, in-person public hearings. So for Wisconsin Public Service, it's November 1st, 2 o'clock and 6 o'clock at Neville Public Museum, right in downtown Green Bay, right along the river, Fox River, 210 Museum Place, but right in downtown Green Bay. And on November 1st, 2 p.m. and 6 p.m. And for We Energies, it's going to be November 3rd, same time, 2 p.m. and 6 p.m. at the Washington Park Senior Center on 4420 West Fleet Street in Milwaukee. So we've got public hearings scheduled and online public comments. I just checked the We Energy's public comment page today, and there's a bunch of recent comments that have come in, but we encourage people to make your voice heard.
So we'll get into some of the details, but again, so public hearings for, in order, I guess, of sort of deadlines coming up soon. Wisconsin Public Service Corporation customers, public hearing on November 1st at the Neville Public Museum. That's from at 2 o'clock as well as at 6 o'clock. So they'll hold two different public sessions on those days. And for We Energy's customers, that'll be on the 3rd. Again, two sessions in person at the Washington Park Senior Center, again at 2 p.m. and 6 p.m. that day. So if you want to show up in person and make your voice heard that way, that is an option for you. Or it doesn't carry any more or less weight. If you'd like to file a comment online with the commission, you can file with in the Wisconsin Public Service case by November 3rd online, or by November 7th for the We Energy's case. So that we cannot emphasize enough, if the idea of a 12.5 or a 13% increase or a 14.5% increase on your electric bills, plus a non-trivial increase on the gas side, is something that you are not happy about, please make certain to file your public comments. But so anyway, we want to make certain not to sort of bury the lead on that stuff, so that we wanted to make certain people were aware of that. Maybe backing up a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's big stuff because we want people to participate. We want. I think participation is critical, especially this year.
Mm-hmm. So backing up a little bit.
Yes.
So two cases. They're both. We internally, in the biz here, we kind of refer to them as the WEC utilities. They're both owned by the WEC Energy Group. They're affiliates, or the WEC Energy Group is the holding company that owns both of these utilities, We Energies and Wisconsin Public Service. And they came in earlier this year for a rate case. And so things have changed a little bit from when this was initially filed, right? This was looking like the first kind of fully litigated, everything on the table, the commission making a decision on every single point on this, and all the parties really sort of having that fight alongside commission staff, arguing over every little item within the rate case. And there was a pretty sizable increase from the start, right?
Exactly.
I mean, we were looking in the 10 to 12% range for these two utilities overall. But the utilities, as part of their application, the companies came in, again, with essentially their proposals that they would be limiting the residential increase to about 5 or 6%. And then, the process moves on. We were here focusing on two issues, and we think they're probably going to be the things that are of most interest to customers as well. Is we focused most of our work and testimony on utility profits, utility return on equity, to use the term of art, and cost allocation, which is essentially once the commission decides how big the pie is, how much money the utility needs overall, how do you split that up between the different customer groups?
Yeah, how do you divvy that pie up? That's a big one.
Then that's always a tough one. And so, we put in our testimony. But along the way, we ended up, people will probably see, if they're interested in getting involved in this, they might have seen or might see in the press something about a settlement agreement.
Correct.
All right. I don't know if you wanted to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, so CUB did reach a settlement with both utilities. And so the settlement allows for the rate case, much of the rate case to get resolved, but allows us to keep fighting on those core issues that Corey just mentioned, the utility profits and how to divvy up that pie. But we did resolve a bunch of issues, and we got some important wins for customers along the way. One of them is the fixed charge. That's always something that people care about. The fixed customer charge is would come down for both We Energies and Wisconsin Public Service as part of this. $1 a month for We Energies electric customers, $2 a month from 21 down to 19 for the Wisconsin Public Service customers. And another thing that we talk about a lot is the costs associated with shuttered or dormant or dead coal plants, utility customers having to continue to bear those costs, and utilities continue to profit from that. So We Energy's WEC agreed to, and in the We Energy's case, to refinance a portion of those costs for Oak Creek, and we got some other good wins too.
Yeah, so we were able to, through settlement, reach agreement with the utilities as well as other parties.
Other parties are involved.
Particularly with on the We Energy side, there were a number of parties that were participating, and we kind of addressed, like you mentioned, a lot of things on sort of the revenue requirement, how big the pie is.
Right.
And I think the big ones right away for customers you hit, but just to from my perspective, it's the company writing off all of the deferrals that the company was allowed to accumulate. They were basically able to sort of calculate or estimate how much money they would have collected in late fees, as well as all of the sort of unpaid bills and bad debt that had accumulated through the last couple of years through COVID and hadn't yet been paid off. As well as some other COVID-related expenses, and the utility agreed to not seek recovery of those, to write those off, and then so those are gone.
Those will be shareholder expenses.
Yeah, shareholder expenses, and so the company agreed to some burden sharing, which was great, so customers won't have to pay for that.
That's good.
And then the other one is the customer charge. But we're also playing a little bit of defense on, like you said, the early coal plant retirement costs, and making certain that we're able to get a commitment from the utility to refinance those, and actually to refinance those a little bit earlier than we would probably normally look at that. While the plants are still operating in the last couple of years, they would be essentially refinanced through a securitization approach. And so, there's this settlement is sort of this extra layer on this already big, sort of complicated rate case.
And some progress for low-income customers.
Yes. And
so that they're going to extend We Energies and Wisconsin Public Service will extend the LIFT program, which is a forgiveness program for low-income customers. And then they've agreed to discuss and propose a percent of income discount rate, and work with CUB and other interested groups to move that to discuss that and hash that out, what that actually looks like. But that's a big development too.
Yeah, that's going to be really important. And so the utility is committed to work with us over the next year to bring something before the commission sometime during calendar year 23. The idea being that something will be brought before the commission, basically to try to get something implemented in 24. So those are all really good wins, but like you mentioned, what it leaves. So it's kind of, if the commission, so it's still a proposal, right? So the parties reached an agreement, and we signed on the dotted and said we've settled this set of issues.
Correct.
But that's still a proposal that has to go before the regulator, and they have to sign off on that. But if the commission were to bless the settlement agreement, substantially as it's currently, been agreed to, still leaves those two issues, right? Revenue allocation and return on equity, the profit issue.
Right.
And, circling back to encouraging folks to go out and make certain their voice is heard by the commission, the reason why we emphasize these numbers here and then the big 13 and 14% numbers is because it's almost entirely driven by an issue that is referred to in utility regulation as revenue allocation. It's that splitting the pie.
Splitting the pie, and who pays?
And who pays?
Who bears the brunt of this? And is it because when there's the simple way to think about it is when there's say it's an 8% increase. It's not 8% for everybody. It's never. It rarely seems to work out that way, where it's at 8% for every type of customer, right?
Yeah, it never is. I've spent almost my entire career in the utility industry wrestling with that exact issue. Is not only how do you set the rates, the actual numbers on the bill that you see, but how you make these big decisions about how you split the bill. For the utility costs across the different customer classes. And traditionally what the utility or the way that it has worked, I guess, is that, CUB's been at the table since 1979 arguing for large, on behalf of small customers. For residential customers, residential and small business customers. But, we're not the only customer group in the room, right?
Exactly.
So another sort of frequent flyer, I guess, before the commission would be the Wisconsin Industrial Energy Group. And they also participated in this case. And they propose an alternative to the utilities' original way to split the bill.
And they represent the large energy users, the large manufacturers.
Yeah. So the Wisconsin Industrial Energy Group can be thought of as the big industrial customers is what they are. They're the largest. They tend to be not just every industrial customer, but the very largest of the customers across the various utilities. So the biggest loads, the biggest users of electricity. And, they've got their interest and they want to, they're as most businesses, they want lower costs and cheaper everything, which I get. But so they put in a proposal from their end, and because they didn't like the fact that they felt that we're paying more than they felt was fair under the utilities' original proposal. You think that's a fair characterization?
Exactly. So under the original proposal, where it was going to be $5 to $6 a month for residential folks, it was going to be a bigger burden, a bigger than average increase was proposed to hit, is what the utility was proposing would hit large customers. But now the script has reversed or flipped.
Yes. And so the utility basically at the first opportunity that they had decided to throw this whole idea out the window.
Gonzo.
And ultimately, explicitly embraced the proposal by the large industrial group.
Right. And so that settles you. Those of us who are We Energy's customers, I'm a We Energy's customer, and I used to be a pub service customer when I lived in Green Bay. So We Energy's and pub service customers, it saddles the residential and, for that matter, the small business customers with these higher than average increases.
Yeah.
If the commission approves this proposal.
Yeah. So, we argued before in our testimony, in our briefs before the legal briefs before the commission that, this is not. As much as the utilities will make and other parties will make it sound like this is a turn the crank math exercise where you put things into a model and it kicks out the right answer, it's ultimately not. It's rate making for utilities is you'll hear rate analysts like myself say that it's both an art and a science. And part of that art part is there are public policy considerations, right?
Right.
And these rate increases would not happen in a vacuum. There's other things going on in the economy that customers will have to deal with that this is just going to make worse.
Exactly, and it's happening in the context of a natural gas price environment that's already going to hit customers in terms of heating bill costs. The commodity cost of natural gas isn't something that the utility has control of, or the CUB has control of, or the PSC has control of, but it's hitting people, and it's hitting people this winter, where We Energies has said it's going to be up to $180 for the winter heating season just on the natural gas side of the bill. Mm-hmm. And so it's that context of other things that you got to pay for, where this residential and small business customers bearing the brunt of the electric rate increase is a non-starter for me.
Well, yeah, and it's I guess the way I look at it is along those same lines. But when you think about utility service, right? Certainly, if businesses are facing economic pressures and electricity is a major expense, a major input to your business, then yes, it might make your services or your products less competitive. And maybe businesses could go out of business if the costs are really high, right? And that would be unfortunate. There are economic effects to that. But if residential customers can't pay their electric bill, right, and they cannot get the essential life-sustaining service that electric and natural gas service is in this state,
Right.
All right. And I do have to acknowledge and recognize that we do have a disconnection moratorium during the winter in Wisconsin, which helps protect people during the coldest months.
Right.
But it certainly isn't going to help anyone in the middle of summer if they can't pay their bill and we get a heat wave, right?
Exactly.
Electricity, natural gas, water. We're not talking about water right now, but all of the utilities, all these major regulated utility services are essential services, life-sustaining services. And so, yes, businesses could face financial hardship and potentially go out of business, but people could die if they can't pay their electric bill. And so that's, the reason why we don't have just a computer kicking out numbers that we pay in our utility rates, but instead we have three, flesh and blood human beings making policy decisions, is because ultimately these things do come down to a public policy decision by the regulator. And we think that, from our perspective, mark the date and time, but the utilities' original proposal is the right way to go.
It is. They had the right approach. They said they expressly had concerns about affordability for residential and small business customers, and that props to them for doing that when they filed their initial proposal. And I was surprised when the initial proposal came out, and it looked like it was about going to be an 8%-ish increase, but that residential was going to be hit with 5 to 6. I was like, well, good for them. Mm-hmm. But bad for them, bad for where things are now. So let's get this changed, and let's. That's why we want you to raise your voice. We raised our voice in the case, and it's time for the public to weigh in as well.
Yeah. So for the folks, listening and following along, if you think that it's not fair for residential customers to bear, really bear the burden of this rate increase, to pay significantly more than the overall, ask that the utility is getting, essentially to benefit large industrial customers, then, make certain utility commission that. And the other part too is, we worked hard along with other parties, but we worked hard on the settlement agreement. And the settlement agreement includes tens of millions of dollars of write-offs and COVID deferral expenses that would have been paid for by customers in 2023. The utility had walked in the door and said, we want the customers to start paying for some of this stuff. Yep. And we got them to write it off in the settlement agreement. And if the commission accepts what the company is saying now, if they side with the large industrial customers, all of those COVID write-off benefits, which is largely costs that would have been borne by small customers, all those benefits flow to the large industrial customers, right?
Yeah, that's actually true.
So I mean, it doesn't seem fair on a number of fronts.
Yeah, it's just not fair.
So there's that's the big one. That's the fairness issue in this case is that revenue allocation? Is that how you split the check, how you split the bill, however you want to, the pie, however you want to look at it in terms of metaphors. The other one we mentioned was utility profits, return on equity.
Right.
And so we put in significant testimony there, and without getting into the gory details, You're not a financial analyst, guys.
I'm not an analyst, and I didn't testify in this case, so maybe I could try doing it in the layman's terms because I'm more of a layman.
Yeah. So how about you summarize?
I've followed this industry for a while, but essentially, our testimony echoes what CUB has always advocated for, which is that utility profits are too high. And one of the things we've always emphasized for Wisconsin utility rates is that our profits are far above the national average. For these utilities, the profit rates, our ROE is set at 10 or 10.2%, and the national average is in the 9.5-ish range. But what emerged through this case was that the rates nationwide are too high, right? Mm-hmm. And so we brought a lot of evidence into the case about that. And right at the end of the case, the Berkeley Business School Energy Institute put out its own research that showed that nationwide, these profit rates are too high to the tune of $2 to $20 billion a year that customers every year. So let me say that again: $2 billion to $20 billion every year that customers are overpaying because utility profits are too high. And so that's where Corey And Steve, our economist and regulatory strategist, came up with a much saner proposal to have those profit rates set at 9% for We Energies and 9.1% for Wisconsin Public Service, and and that's an area where that's a portion of the case where the decision in this case could actually save customers real money and change the numbers in this case before the new rates are set for January 1st.
Yeah, I mean that issue would certainly help. I mean, I think especially for residential customers, the revenue allocation issue it overwhelms pretty much everything else because you can, with a flick of a pen, you can move hundreds of millions of dollars around in this revenue allocation issue. But yeah, on the return on equity on the profit side, you're right. That's sort of the traditional lens that CUB, our office has looked at it, Wisconsin CUB has looked at it, and admittedly a lot of other consumer advocate offices around the country look at it. They look at sort of national averages and say, where is my utility compared to the national average? But one of the things that we really wanted to emphasize before the commission this year is like, look, okay, the way we go about setting rates in this regulated environment is not just, you don't get to just make it up, okay? There's decades of legal precedent, in particular Supreme Court precedent,
right,
about when the commission is supposed to set just and reasonable rates, right? That's the just and reasonable standard. And so, the picky person will ask, well, what do you mean by just and reasonable, right? That sounds subjective. But the Supreme Court had, stated decades ago that in determining whether or not a utility's rates are just and reasonable, the interests of the utility shareholders and the customer need to be considered, and those need to be fairly balanced.
Exactly.
Right? And so the problem is that the utilities come in and they basically we would argue, and this is more, I guess, a little more editorializing here. They basically mischaracterize how their profit level should be set, how their return on equity, authorized return on equity percentage should be set, and saying, well, the commission, you have to adhere to these models, and here's how we do the math. And the way they do it, I think we mentioned this in a previous podcast, the way that they do the math is basically not in keeping with how anyone else does it. The utilities essentially cook the books on how they estimate what their necessary profit level is in order to inflate that. But then, more importantly, in this legal requirement set forth by the Supreme Court that the utility shareholder and the customer interests need to be considered and fairly balanced, right? They basically offer nothing, no explanation, no evidence, no testimony, other than just them saying that the number we asked for does balance shareholder and ratepayer interest, and that doesn't fly by me. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, no, and it's time to, if you're gonna get a healthy return, you shouldn't be getting that just for showing up, and that's where your testimony actually talked about. Well, let's use benchmarks to actually say, well, financial incentives should be earned and not just received.
Yes, that's a sort of a core tenet of regulation generally is that profits above utility returns that are greater than what they need to attract capital, more than what the market requires, is all just a giveaway to shareholders. And to your point, we're not saying, for example, let's use a specific number. Right now, Wisconsin Electric Company, their current rates include a 10% return on equity. Right. That's the sort of the profit part. In their capital structure, there's debt, but the profit part for their investors is that return on equity, and it's 10% in their rates. We're not saying that 10% could never be the right number, but it needs to be earned, to your point.
Exactly.
Right? If customers are going to pay significantly more than the cost of equity through their rates, right? That premium needs to be earned for something. The value proposition for the customer needs to be there. It can't just be for the utility showing up for work and saying, we're a public utility and we're entitled to these really, really high returns.
Yeah, and the job of the regulators to say, how are they doing on reliability, on affordability, on making sure the customer service is good, on enabling customers to take advantage of energy efficiency, on all sorts of things.
Yeah. And so we didn't, the utility didn't file a lot of, well, they didn't provide any evidence, like I mentioned.
Right. They didn't talk about customer impact.
They didn't talk about customer pretty much at all.
Right.
And so what we said is, well, the utility hasn't done anything. Here's some Commission. Here's some examples of what you could look at.
Exactly.
And actually, and consistent with that framework, we wanted to be true to what we were saying. The utility halfway through said, "Hey, Mr. Singletary, by the analysis that you did on these 3 metrics that I provided for illustrative purposes, they were like, it looks like Wisconsin Public Service is doing so much better than We Energies," which is a little bit of an exaggeration. But we were like, okay, we'll grant you that they perform a little bit better within this narrow view. So, okay, 10 basis points, 0.1%. We'll recognize that difference in performance, and that's how it's supposed to work.
Right. And on rates in particular, WPS rates have been much more affordable. And then on some other metrics, they were doing a little better than We Energies as well.
Yeah, their overall average cost is a little bit lower. Their affordability is their reliability was actually better than I had expected before I looked at the data. And at least if to the extent that one believes in JD Power as a reliable source for customer service, scores, they've scored fairly well over the years. So yeah, it's like, but that's sort of how it's supposed to work. The commission is supposed to take in the financial, the wonky evidence, the kind of stuff that Steve works on, and say, this is what the cost of equity is.
Right.
Here's our floor. And then they make a policy call.
Right.
If the utilities return, if their return is to be set any higher than that, the Supreme Court has stated that premium needs to reflect a balance between the shareholder and the customer interest.
Exactly.
And again, if in terms of public comments, if you have thoughts on utility returns, feel free to definitely make certain to mention those, because those are really, at this point, those are the only 2 major issues left in the case.
Yep, the profits being too high, and I mean, obviously the shareholders have done well over the years for these utilities. The utility stocks have outpaced the market generally over time, and again this year. And so yeah, on those core issues, these are good ones to weigh in on at either at those online public comments or at those public hearings. The high profits, and then residential customers having to bear the brunt of whatever increase gets hit. It's those are things to sound off on, I would say.
All right. Well, yeah. So again, November 1st for Wisconsin Public Service at the Neville Public Museum. November 3rd at the Washington Park Senior Center for Wisconsin Electric Corporation. That will be down in Milwaukee for those public hearings. Otherwise, go to the PSC website. That would be psc.wi.gov, and go to their file a comment section on their website and you can file your comments online. Just do one or the other. Don't do both.
Good tip. And then we'll have links to those public comment sites from the CUB blog at cubwi.org/blog. So we'll have links there too to make it easy for you.
All right. Well, after the commission takes in all these public comments, I think we were taking some odds on when we might see a commission decision. My guess is the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, but I guess we'll have to see.
Yeah, that's often a time when big cases and ones that have gotten a lot of headlines, which this one has, get decided. So, but it could be a little bit before that. It could be the first week of December even. But
yeah. So we shall see, and we'll keep folks updated. But definitely make your voice heard. If you're a customer of We Energies in Wisconsin or Wisconsin Public Service Corporation, make certain to stand up and participate in the process as well.
Yeah, this is your chance. And the other thing we should say is like and subscribe.
Yep. Yes. Like and subscribe, hit the notification bell, all that fun stuff. Actually, put a comment down below. Any engagement helps us out. I hate to do the sales pitch, but the algorithm is a brutal mistress, and if you don't feed and take care of her, she does not promote your videos, and that makes it so fewer of our constituents and fewer Wisconsin customers see these videos or listen to the podcast. So make certain to rate, like, subscribe, all the fun stuff, hit all the fun buttons, all the thumbs ups.
And check out the webinars. We have 6 webinars from this year that are on the YouTube page, elsewhere on the YouTube page, including the one from September 22nd. If you want to go there, there's a lot of good information there. If you want to think about taking steps to deal with looming energy cost increases on the heating costs. In particular, we had a really good dialogue with the expert from Focus on Energy on that one. So check that one out too. Thanks.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.